And there we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome in. Thank you so much for coming. I want to bring you an amazing author today. And I want to start off, if you don't mind, by reading your bio. When Zamil was 14, he moved from the dry, dune-spotted Arabian Peninsula to the hilly Arctic wasteland that is Western Massachusetts. He despises the cold. He isn't very fond of the sun. Prefers spending all day indoors, mashing the keyboard in the hopes something great will come out of it, and it does. When not dreaming up dark and fantastical journeys, he enjoys binging horror movies, wasting precious time arguing about international relations on Reddit, and occasionally traveling somewhere exotic. Currently lives in Dubai with his loving wife and his badly behaved pet rabbit. Please tell me the rabbit is still going.
Yep, he's right. You can see his cage actually right there. It takes up it's like a massive cage, takes up a big part of my space, but he needs it.
I love that. And I want to read some of these reviews real quick before we jump in. Daniel Green says that Gunmetal Gods is a superb epic fantasy, a gem. Reedsy says it's a huge epic story with absolute page turner, full of amazing battles, intense political intrigue, surprises at every turn, easily stands with the best of epic fantasy fiction. Martin Talks calls it an epic tale, a rolling roller coaster to read. My favorite review is, I was neglecting other responsibilities to see what would happen next. And we are here for one reason, which is to sell more books. So before we go any further, I want you to go to Amazon right now. If you haven't read it, buy Gunmetal Gods and read it before the end of the interview. Make it happen. I was absolutely blown away. So Zamil, thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's we got the third book releasing tomorrow, so I'm low on sleep, but I'm excited to be here and to talk about all of it.
So, like, how are you right now? Like, emotionally, are you completely drained and exhausted? Are you excited and thrilled? Like, where are you on the spectrum right now?
Honestly, it's all of what you just said. It's like a combination of both, where you're excited, but surrounding all of that is all the fatigue and all the tiredness from trying to promote like a book in the week up to its release, and just at the end of this huge process of writing the book, getting it ready to sell and promoting it, you're drained. So I'm running on empty, but I have to keep it up. There's one more day to go, literally. So
one more day to go. So tomorrow, do you get to like take your hands off the wheel for a second and take a breather and go outside and breathe fresh air, or do you feel like you need to keep pushing?
Yeah, you definitely need to keep pushing. Probably I'll be in this mental state where I'm really trying to push and really trying to promote the book for about 2 weeks after the launch, but it'll die down. Like it'll by the second week it'll be a lot more chill, and then there'll be this big hole in my day where I don't have a project. So I don't have this book that I'm writing, and I don't have anything coming out. So then I'll have to fill that hole somehow, and might take a break before I try to do that, but we'll see.
Got it. So do you experience like a postpartum depression after a book releases? Yeah. Okay. So do you have a system to deal with that, or do you just kind of let the emotions do their job?
This is where it helps to have hobbies. Now, writing was my hobby. So now I don't really have hobbies because writing is now my profession. And so it really is where I will sit there and be like, oh, wow, I need to write another book because, something has to fill this gaping hole in my heart, basically. But I don't want to do that like immediately, because if you sit down and try to write the book, another part of you will be like, I'm tired, I'm too tired for this. So you have to like listen to that part as well and take like a break, maybe. uh I don't know, find something to do. Maybe I'll play a video game, maybe I'll take a little trip somewhere, something to really refresh myself, basically.
So is that the stuff that recharges your batteries? Is it like, would the ultimate version of recharging your batteries look like traveling to Australia and playing Legend of Zelda?
Yeah, that sounds exactly right.
We'll get it
Like
on the calendar. Folks, we're going to start a Kickstarter right now for the Australian Legend of Zelda. What are your video games? What do you like playing?
So yeah, Zelda is coming out soon. That's definitely one actually which I'm looking forward to. And I think the last game that I really got into was what's it called? Elden Ring. That
Oh, okay.
one, that was obviously a huge game. That was way back though, last year. So since then I haven't really, like when I'm working on a book, I don't really let myself stop to play a video game, because when I'm really into a game, it tends to absorb me completely. So I haven't really played anything uh since then. So Zelda is coming out at pretty much the right time. So I am looking forward to checking that one out.
Link is here to rescue you. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is book 3 of 3. Is that correct?
There will be at least one more book.
Okay.
So it's not quite, the story isn't quite over yet. There could be two more books. It really depends on if I can conclude the story in the next book.
Nice. Now, and you haven't started on 4 yet. You're just kind of letting things simmer for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I want to get started on it like pretty soon, after I take a little break. I have a lot of ideas for it, and you know, but I do want to see the reaction to the third book before I really get going.
Do we see? I looked up in the synopsis, and I'm not really sure. Are we going back to Keva?
Yeah, the third book goes back to Keva. So he's the point of view character, and there are other points of view characters as well. Um, and but there is like a big overarching story that I do want to continue to explore. So who the points of view characters will be for the next book, probably it will continue to be Keva, but I can't say for sure.
So I need to talk about Keva and Micah here real quick. First of all, I was blown away. You sucked me in so fast that I was all over it, and I loved both of those characters for very, very, very different reasons. Where did the inspiration for Keva come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was always interested in writing a character who was a janissary. So janissaries were slave soldiers that used to serve in the armies of the Ottoman Empire, and I just found the idea quite interesting. What it would be like to be that sort of person, because they were, despite being slaves, they were very loyal and very fought very fiercely, and they took a lot of pride in who they were and what they were doing. So just that seemed pretty unique to me, especially in fantasy. So that's sort of where the idea for uh, Keva came from. And for Micah, it was more. Sorry, did you
Oh
ask about
no, don't
Micah
be
as well?
sorry. I will
Don't
listen
be
to
sorry.
every syllable.
Yeah. Yeah. So for Micah, it was more like, I was reading accounts of the First Crusade, and there are so many interesting like characters in history who were on that crusade. So I kind of thought, well, what would it be like to write a story from the perspective of someone like that? Because to those people, they were very convinced that they were doing the right thing, and that they were you know, like like the most heroic, amazing people in the world. So it was more like, how do you get into a character who's doing some really awful things, but is very convinced that they are, justified in what they're doing. And so that's sort of where Micah grew from.
That sense of self-righteousness just kind of pervades through everything he does.
Yep.
And I gotta say, I struggled to come up with a character in fiction that I have disliked more than Micah. So thank you for creating someone for me to hate.
Yeah, that was like a lot of the fun, I think, with writing that character. um and I think that's not such a his mentality is not so uncommon. I think we see it in a lot of people, a lot of politicians especially. So it's interesting. I find it interesting to explore that. um Even though he takes up about half of the book, his point of view takes up like so many pages. I think for a lot of people it was too much, but then for a lot of people it's enjoyable. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I couldn't get enough. I want you to die. I want you to die. So, the whole time that I'm going through it. The For those of you who haven't read Gunmetal Gods yet, I need to kind of set the landscape here. It basically takes the idea of the Crusades and turns it into a fantasy fiction that has that as its root. And you're given two point of views from either side of the war. And one of the things that I loved about what you did, and we'll talk about research later because you did a ton, but you took the real world and applied it to the world that you created. So as a lazy reader, it made it very easy for me to go, oh, this is like this and this is like this. So I understood the world much more quickly than I would have otherwise, because it's all analogous. And that was part of the great fun of it. And Costany sitting in the role of Jerusalem was just fantastic. And I was it 100% of it pulled from First Crusade? Because you did a ton of research. So you did research on gunpowder eras in 3 different societies. You dug into histories that aren't written in English, and digging deep down to get what you were looking for. How much time did all that take? Did you enjoy doing all that? And I'll go back to the original question. Do you feel like a lot of it is based on First Crusade, or are there other pieces that play heavily in there?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of time periods that I looked at and sort of combined with this story. So the Crusades, the First Crusade actually was not fought with gunpowder at all.
Right.
And there were no janissaries around at the time either. The Ottoman Empire was not a thing yet. So I sort of took the period of the Crusades and combined it with basically the early Ottoman Empire about 200-300 years later. And Costany is a lot like Jerusalem. It's also a lot like Constantinople. So it sort of combines. Okay. Yeah, it sort of combines aspects of both cities. And Constantinople, was holy to the Eastern Orthodox Christians. So it also had that veneer of a holy city. But I took a lot of aspects from history from other periods as well, and sort of just mishmash them together. And since it's a fantasy world, you can do that. That's the best part of writing fantasy, is that you're not constrained. Like if I was writing historical fiction or even historical fantasy, I would be hard pressed to follow sort of what was going on at the time, and you're limited. But here, yeah, I just took what I wanted and put them together, so you sort of have a Crusades with gunpowder weapons, early gunpowder weapons, with magic, and with characters that are, inspired by different time periods. And yeah, the world especially is more based on like 15th century, where you had these different gunpowder empires um, competing with each other. But yeah, so it was just and a lot of these historical ideas are things that I just had in my head and things that I've been learning about like throughout my life. So there wasn't really like too much of a need for me to study something specifically just to write these books. But I definitely, poured over like different books on these periods just to get all the details in, because you want you don't we don't really know what life was like in those times, so we kind of need details to fill that in, and that's kind of the only way to learn about that.
Well, and one of the great things in going through this, and God bless Kindle, is being able to look up words while you're going through and realizing the Janissaries were a real thing. And you've got 5 or 6 examples of that during the story. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a real thing. He looked this up. He figured out what this was and managed to weave this into the story. So it felt, like a whole tapestry. It was absolutely beautiful. I'm praising as much as I can because I just loved it. The Magus and the Magus masks. Where did that come from? Because I have never seen it before, and I thought it was a beautiful way to get where you were going. Was that something that you invented out of whole cloth? Was it pulled from a couple of different things?
That's a good question. Honestly, I can't recall if I got that from somewhere. The idea of the masks. I think that's sort of something that I just invented, and it. I always have had this image in my head of like a sorcerer wearing a mask. Um, Although in the story the masks are invisible, so
Yeah,
they're
right.
not masks that you see, except when the sorcerer is killed, when the magus is killed, then you can see the mask. So I don't know. It's just weird. I just had this idea in my head, and I put it onto the page, and it worked out.
Boy, did it ever. And one of the things, and okay, everybody who hasn't read the book, do spoilers for the next 20 seconds. One of the things that I loved about Keva as a character was that he didn't know how he had done it. Right, the thing that he is known for, he feels like is, well, I'm not exactly sure I pulled that off. It's a brilliant character moment. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Keva, he's had a lot of luck in his life, and he's had a lot of basically people helping him out who were also very skilled. But he's received a lot of the accolades and a lot of the benefit, and some of that he realizes is not just because of him, but he also he's like anyone would be. He wants to feel good about himself. He wants to take credit for things. He's boastful at times, so he sort of has this incongruence within him where he's done some great things and he enjoys the praise for it, but he knows deep down that he's not necessarily the only one to he's not as good as other people make him out to be, basically.
Right. And then the last piece I want to ask about the book is Labyrinthos. What the hell, man? Where did this come from? Because just and it's very nebulous, which I love. But where did that idea pop up? Because I had never seen anything like that before.
That's a good question. Honestly, it's funny because you have these ideas, and sometimes it's tough to know exactly where they come from. But Labyrinthos, actually, I was watching a horror movie called As Above, So Below. And this movie is about, have you seen this one? It's about,
No, it's on the list. My problem
it's
with horror movies these days is I have an 11-year-old son. So unless we wait until 10 o'clock at night to start it, and my wife falls asleep about 10:15.
Makes sense. But in the movie, they're exploring these tunnels below Paris, and eventually, while they're exploring, they literally enter through the tunnel to hell, and it all happens sort of by mistake. Like they did not know that was going to happen. So that's I think where the idea for Labyrinthos came from, and it also relates to the old ideas of the underworld and that sort of thing. But I wanted to make it really Lovecraftian and really terrifying,
Yeah.
and really magical, and just I wanted it to be just to have all those qualities all together. Yeah, and that's how Labyrinthos came to be.
I just think it was absolutely phenomenal. I just all the pieces. It's delicious. If please read the book, it is amazing. Uh, so you were talking with Ben Galley at one point, and you had talked about how it's actually difficult for you to pull inspiration from things in your adult life, and how you draw a lot of what you write about and the stories that you want to tell from when you were a kid. Can you fill me in a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I feel like when I was younger, I had more of a maybe I suppose this is a common thing, but you have more of an imagination in the sense that your ideas for creativity are not beaten down by all kinds of you know constraints like, oh, this is not realistic, this is not this is not that. As an adult, we're sort of very rigid. We tend to become more rigid and critical in our thinking. So I have a lot of ideas just from when I was younger, where that I am still expressing in the stories I write today. Like these are ideas which I thought of, when I was in high school, or even earlier, and just things that at the time were so amazing to me, but I never had the chance to sit down and write them. And I still pull from all of that. I still think about all of that. And it tends to guide me sometimes in stories where I don't have a, you know, I can't just think of something out of the blue, like something out of nowhere. And but I still have all those things that I dreamt up when I was younger, and yeah, they're still a treasure trove to me.
Right. Only like 25 more books waiting to go from those memories. Because you grew up in Saudi Arabia, you moved to Massachusetts, you live in Dubai now, your wife is Filipino, your folks are Pakistani. Did you grow up feeling like a stranger in a strange land at every given point? Or, that's, I think of you almost like a military brat, but extended over like your whole life, or you're place to place to place to place. Do you feel like a fish out of water? Do you feel like you're at home anywhere? What does that feel like?
Yeah, you nailed it. You don't feel at home anywhere. Um, and but it's exactly like that. If I'm with when I was living in Western Massachusetts, you felt out of place to some degree. And even now living in Dubai, I feel out of place to some degree. So it's like you always feel out of place to a certain degree, but then you become comfortable with it. And now I feel like I could live anywhere because I'm comfortable being out of place and not feeling like I totally fit in anywhere. um and it's something that can be a struggle, but I think it also helped me to in think with different perspectives, so I could see things entirely through someone else's
Yeah.
perspective, and embody that perspective fully. So it helped with that as well.
So, like, what were you like when you were a kid? And I'm talking about prepubescent, 11, 12, 13 years old. Like, are you the studious, dutiful son? Are you, the kid running around getting in trouble? Are you in a closet reading books all the time? What do you, what does your childhood look like?
uh that's a good question. I played a lot of video games, and I was not studious. And I think the best way to describe my studiousness was inconsistent. So there were times when I was getting like all A's on my report card. And then there were times when I just didn't care and I was just stuck playing video games all the time. So that's how my parents would describe me, as inconsistent and uh, you know, lacking focus, that sort of thing. But I, now looking back on my childhood, I think it was great. I basically just explored the things I wanted to explore. I didn't force myself to sit down and just achieve academically.
Hmm.
And it's helped me as a writer, because I explored what I wanted to explore. If I wanted to play video games, I played video games. If I wanted to read a book, I read a book. If I wanted to watch movies, I watched movies. So it definitely, you know, helped me with my creativity, I think.
Well, you just got to follow your nose and dig down any rabbit hole you wanted to. Yeah,
Yep.
were your parents permissive of that, or were your parents like, "Oh, hey, you should get your nose back in a book"?
They were, I think they very much encouraged me to focus on my studies, but to some extent they couldn't stop me from doing. I think because I'm the youngest child, so by then they were tired. They were tired because they'd put all the disciplinary focus and all the intense like stuff on my older siblings. So for me, I sort of got a pass, and I ended up doing what I wanted to do. And they were strongly trying to encourage me to focus more on school and all of that. But I think they gave at some point they were just like, he's not gonna do it. Uh and it I became what I became, I guess.
Worked out just fine. So, like, did you have, like, when you were growing up, did you want to be an author? Did you want to be a railroad worker? Did it change every 5 minutes? What did that look like?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to be an author. I knew from when I was in 8th grade, I think. Yeah, that I knew that I wanted to be an author, because I thought of all the things people were doing, and I was not interested in doing any of them, except for being an author, except for telling stories. And um but I think I never really believed I could do it until now. So it took a long time to believe that it was possible. And I was um I think that underlies, a lot of the difficulty, I think, with actually telling myself, okay, I can sit down and write this book, because I only wrote Gunmetal Gods in 2019.
Hmm.
And but I'd wanted to be an author since I was a little kid, so that's a long gap where I didn't believe it was possible. um yeah.
Well, which leads us into something else, which is I think is really genuinely inspirational about you, because your writing journey has been really interesting, and it's not this road to success paved with gold every step of the way, right? You talked about Song of a Dead Star, and how you're really emotionally invested in this. It's your first book, and you release it, and it doesn't go the way that you're expecting, and that's like a punch to the face for the thrilled, inspired new author, and yet you overcame it. Can you talk about that period of your writing journey?
Yeah, I think Song of a Dead Star, which I wrote while I was in college,
Okay.
I that was, and I'd been thinking about that story even when I was in high school. It had been percolating in my mind a long time, but it was difficult to believe that I could actually do it, and that I could actually sell this book and make it a success. I think because a lot of the messages we get are basically that you can't succeed as a writer, and you can't, um, you know, you just can't do it. And this is a message that I think internalized. And I think I don't even know where it was coming from. It's just in general in our society, something there's a negativity toward creatives in that regard.
Absolutely.
And so I tried to build up this hope in myself that I could write this book and that it could succeed. um but I think I was undermining myself as well, because I didn't put when I released Song of a Dead Star, I didn't really put my fullest effort into actually selling the book,
Sure.
and marketing the book, because I
It-
just didn't believe I could do it. And so for 10 years, or I think maybe a little less than that, 5 years, um, between when I released it and when I started writing Gunmetal Gods, I had to slowly come back to the realization that yes, you can write a book and you can succeed uh, with a book. And I had to sort of, through these 5 years, I had to slowly come to this realization. And I think what helped the most was writing short stories on Reddit.
yeah.
So I wrote these horror short stories on the No Sleep subreddit, and every single one I wrote was very popular. It wasn't like I would write five and only one or two would be popular. Every single one I put down would get hundreds of upvotes, even thousands of upvotes. And so I started to believe, wait a minute, if there are dozens and dozens of stories posted here every day, why are mine succeeding all the time? So maybe I can do it. Maybe I can write a book that will be successful. Maybe I am good enough. Maybe I just have to really apply myself and really, do it seriously. So that's what fomented that belief in me. And then it took a while though. In 2019, then I sat down and started writing Gunmetal Gods.
Well, and it's that inspiration, I think, is something that people need to hear, because what I love is that you put yourself out there and you got punched in the face and you got back up, right? And you said, no, I'm not done. And having that experience on Reddit and being able to put out stories and get that positive reaction is just amazing. And then one day you're just sitting down writing a short story about a janissary that comes out of retirement and asked by the Shah to come and help face a new threat. And in a month, you wrote 140,000 words.
Yeah,
Dude, who are you?
that's still my best, right? That's still my most productive writing month.
I can't
even till
imagine
now.
better.
It was one of those things where you are so hyped. Your writing is like a drug, basically. It's like a drug where you are so compelled to do it. You're so like hooked on it. You're in such a state of flow that it just pours out of you. Um, and it's not like that every time. In fact, I now, after writing a few more books, I realize that that's a unique sort of state which you're only going to have sometimes, and you can't necessarily rely on it to write books. Sometimes it does feel like work, and sometimes you do have to sit down and just put in the word count. But that was a special month in my life, and I can always look back on it and just think about what I was feeling, and what was going through my head, and the elation and all of that. And it was a special time.
Well, and it almost to me feels like you tapped into something spiritual or beyond, because the energy and the fervor that takes. I mean, that's not sitting down for 2 hours a day. That's being on the grind. That is the biggest month I've ever heard of. And being able to reach out and grab onto that electrical cord and saying, this is all mine. And taking all that power for yourself is just, it's inspirational. It feels like you tapped into literal inspiration while you were writing Gunmetal Gods.
I wish I could like drink a potion and have that come back, every time I sit to write a book. That would be something else.
Well, I think be grateful that you got it once, because boy, were the results amazing. And that's what's kind of brought life to the last 2 and 3 years of you just pounding and pounding and pounding. And I keep looking at the ratings and the reviews for the books, and it's just ding, 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 ding. And it's just fantastic to see the journey that it's been on. One of the things that I was interested in a review that you said that you're rarely as motivated as your characters are. But when it comes to the times that they second guess themselves, that's when your inner voice takes over. So
Yeah.
just talk to me a little bit about that.
My characters are very motivated and they tend to really want something very badly. Whereas in my life, I don't always feel that. I'm often in a state of like, uh, alternate, just like in a restful sort of mindset where I'm not too eagerly seeking something out. That's my default mode. But when I have to when I have to make an important decision, that's when, like for me, it can be very difficult, and I will always second guess the decision that I make. So I know what that's like. I really know what it's like to doubt the decisions that you're making and to doubt if it's the best thing for you. And so I think with my characters, while they are very motivated and want something very badly, they're always confronted with dilemmas and of having to choose between what they want and what they believe in, or what they want and something that they already have that they love. So there's always some sacrifice that they are being compelled to make. And that's sort of when I know the discomfort of being in that position. I know it very personally, and so that's where I can really pour my own experiences into what the characters are dealing with.
Well, and there was a period in your life, in your 20s, where you, again, inspirationally, looked at your fears head on and said, you know what, I'm going to tackle these. And like you had I think it was a fear of heights, so you decided to go skydiving. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean that's in my 20s. I'd say like in my mid to late 20s, there was this period where I sort of thought, I've lived my life too too closed off from all the experiences that can be had out there. And but I'm also very scared of trying new things. I'm very scared of just things that make me uncomfortable. So yeah, heights was one of them, and I went skydiving. Um, and just I think I also had like a lot of social anxiety. So for me, just going to like a party or something was sort of stepping outside of my comfort zone and facing my fears. And I think I'd been with like a close group of friends, and I hadn't made other kinds of friends in a long time. So trying to make new friends was also kind of a difficult, uncomfortable thing. So in that time period of my life, I wanted to sort of grow as a person and be more than what I was, and that really did require facing a lot of my fears
Yeah.
and just getting through that threshold of fear and just doing something different.
Well, and it seems to be a theme in your life of, oh my gosh, there's this thing that's really challenging, or I don't want to do, or I'm scared of, or I get punched in the face and I don't feel like getting back up again. And yet, you climb up over the bar and you say, okay, I'm back for round two. Let's go. Uh, you're
Yep.
Spider-Man. You get up. I wanted to
Yeah.
talk about a couple of inspirations for you. I want to start with George R. R. Martin. Um, what did he bring to the table for you?
I think he showed me a different kind of fantasy story, because up until Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire, I had not experienced like a gritty fantasy that's very much based in historical ideas, that has this quality where characters are not they're not the typical fantasy archetypes that we come across. They're more like grounded historical figures. And For me, this was, I think, sort of a transformation in how I thought of fantasy, and in how I wanted to write fantasy, because Song of a Dead Star was much more based on, I guess, a lot of the more typical fantasy things, whereas Gunmetal Gods is very much in the vein of A Song of Ice and Fire, in that it is, the characters are more like, um, historical figures, and they have a more grounded psychology, and a more, and just the things that happen in the story. There's no, there's no happily ever after, in the sense that the hero is destined to win. And so it I think it was sort of the basis by which I constructed Gunmetal Gods, in the vein of Song of Ice and Fire, within its constraints, within what it was trying to do to the fantasy genre.
I I I love that you're able to draw pieces, out of what you're reading and begin to pull that into your own work. The other one that I wanted to ask about was Saladin Ahmed. How did how did their work affect you and bring you forward as a writer?
Yeah, it's a great book, Throne of the Crescent Moon. It's like an Arabian Nights inspired fantasy tale, and he paints an amazing world in that book. It's a very short book, and I wish he got into Marvel, so he didn't continue the series.
Right.
He's a writer for Marvels, but that book was amazing. Like, it just paints this very vivid, very lush, very beautiful prose, this fantasy world based on, mostly on, medieval Baghdad. So it's just beautiful, and it sort of showed me that you can do this. It doesn't all have to be the same. Like a Western European style of world. Fantasy can go in this direction where you have, this completely different sort of world and different sort of context to tell the story. So that was a huge inspiration, and I thought, he did it beautifully. I'm gonna try my hand at it.
Well, and one of the things that I think that you drew out of him as well was descriptions of food.
Oh man, the food descriptions in that book are on another level. Like, in terms of making my mouth water. And yeah, that's something I very actively try to do whenever I'm describing food, is I want the reader to taste the food.
I I personally don't have a big thing for figs, and yet while I'm reading your work, I'm like, I want a fig.
There were my editor actually made a note. There are a lot of figs in this story.
There's a lot of hookahs as well. Whatever.
Yeah. Honestly, I never eat figs, so I don't know what
I
a fig
love
even tastes
that.
like.
I love the fact you're like, figs. You but my characters, yeah, they like
Right.
figs.
It's something people eat in the Middle East. People eat figs. And I think back in the day they used to eat a lot more of it. So yeah, I thought, yeah, figs. It just sounded right for what I was doing.
um, One of the things that you've said is that about Gunmetal Gods is that you hope they come out thinking maybe there are no heroes or villains. Can you take me down? Maybe it's all a matter of perspective. So can you take me down that road a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, I've sort of been forced in my life to see things from different perspectives. So, often there are a lot of conflicts in the world going on, and I've seen some of these from the different sides. And everyone, who's really advocating for something believes they are the good side and they are the hero. And they will make all kinds of moral arguments for why they are good and the other side is bad. But then you switch perspective, you go to the other side and you see they're doing the exact same thing. So that's sort of what Gunmetal Gods as a series is based on. It's based on this idea that, I'm going to set up these conflicts and I'm going to show the reader both sides of the conflict. And I'm going to show that, like, every character thinks they are the hero and thinks they are the ones in the right and that they are doing the right thing and the other side is wrong. And that's, to me, that's what made it interesting, because it's just a reflection of what I experienced, in my life, having to move around so much and see things from these different sides.
Well, and what I love is that you, with Micah, there's not one moment where I don't believe that he believes that he's right. Patently wrong, but
Yep.
but it's fun watching the absolute conviction uh, seen from both sides of the perspective, that all draw you toward this very tragic middle where the results of those beliefs are heartbreaking. And you pulled out some nasty weapons. And again, I think First Crusades, where there were examples of things that had happened and brought those into the story as just absolute moments of horror, that I thought was so great, in part because it was grounded in that reality. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think some of the scenes that you're alluding to are, you know, also kind of the reason that I wrote the book, is that I want to show people that when you have this mentality where you are convinced that you are right and there's no real room for seeing the other side and doubting yourself, then you're capable of doing some really extremely awful things. So that's sort of why those scenes are really like an important part of the book.
And resonate because they're true. So I just want to encourage everybody who watches this to go and buy Gunmetal Gods right now. I don't care if you read it right this second, but I do want you to go and buy it so it's in there in your TBR. And when you get there, you will be glad you did. And Zamil, congratulations on all the success. Congratulations on having the third book over the finish line. And I know your launch is going to be jaw-dropping.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very hopeful.
Oh no, I don't think you needed to have any hope. I think it's built in. You've got a great thing going, and it's wonderful to watch it keep on trucking. And we're all begging for another book, so get to work. All right, are you ready to do 2 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we are going to do 2 minutes of rapid fire questions and close it out after that. So we have 2 minutes with Zamil Akhtar going now. All right, what is the one article of clothing that you could wear that you could make someone walk out on a date with you?
One article of clothing
That your date could wear that would make you walk out.
that my date would wear. Probably if it was my date, oh man, maybe like a fedora or something.
That's a good answer. What is your most used emoji?
Uh Definitely the really wide smile.
Perfect. That's a positive attitude. Who is your childhood crush?
Oh man. What's her name? Uh Man, the name just flew out of my J-Lo. There you go.
Oh, you're not wrong. If you were to describe the perfect reader for Gunmetal Gods, who would it be?
Definitely someone who loves both horror and fantasy.
Perfect. If you were a wrestler, what would your entry theme song be as you came into the ring?
Oh man, it would be a Rammstein song. It would be a metal song.
What's the most embarrassing fashion trend you used to rock?
Oh, I used to have those bowl haircuts.
Oh, right around the Mo, Larry, and Curly. Uh, if someone is looking to fill part of their soul needs to be filled, what do you feel like the hole that Gunmetal Gods fills in somebody?
If you want to fill the hole with cosmic horror, then Gunmetal Gods will fill it completely.
If you, we're almost out of time. So, what is the meaning of life?
42.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We're out of time. 42 is the correct answer. Thank you very much.